have, why don't we?
Well, hello everybody, this is Jkatz, and I have the pleasure today of hosting Living History Chat at Heritage Estates. It's an activity that I started about 4 years ago when I worked here, and it's a pleasure to welcome everybody that has come to this event today, and welcome a special guest, Eileen from Sunrise. Thanks for stopping by, Eileen. And our special guest is our resident. I want to introduce Pearl White. Pearl, I've known Pearl for quite a few years now, but we're going to get to know Pearl a whole lot better here. So, Pearl, let's give Pearl a hand, and thank you for volunteering for this activity, and wanted to hear a little bit about, well, tell me how long first you've lived at Heritage Estates, and then we can sort of go backwards from there.
How did I get?
Now, how long have you lived here at
Oh, 9.5 years.
Really? And let's go backwards here in time. You moved here from?
Actually, directly from North Carolina.
Ah.
Not Silent. It's a very small island, about 20 miles from Virginia Beach.
Oh.
And it's where my husband was from. Yeah, so that's why we retired there.
Oh, so you retired there and moved back here. So were you
After
from here?
he passed.
Were you from here originally?
Yes, I was.
Where is here?
Well, I was born in San Francisco, raised in Hayward. Went to Hayward High, the old beautiful Hayward High School that they tore down, and worked in San Leandro School District and Livermore School District and Arden Farms in San Leandro before I remarried. And then I lived in Reno, Nevada for a while, and Lake Tahoe, Florida, Texas. And then we traveled for 5 years in an RV when I retired, and then ended up retiring in North Carolina.
So you retired more than once?
No.
Just once, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's okay. But going way back, way back, it's my understanding that, and feel free to share whatever you feel like sharing with our residents here, but you were in an orphanage, is that true?
No, not an orphanage.
No?
I was in foster care.
Ah.
Yeah.
Is that something you want to talk about, or?
Well, I did briefly mention to
Sue?
Sue when I talked with her. There would have been a time in my life that I would not have talked about it.
Right.
Because it was a difficult thing when I was younger. But I'm very much past that and feel very fortunate that I was brought up in foster care. My brother and I were always kept together. He was 2 years younger than me, and I was 5 and he was 3 when we were first in foster care. And unfortunately, now that I'm adult and I can look back on things, I was born, of course, as a lot of us were, in the Depression. And my father was, I understand, very successful in business about the time I was born, and started entertaining his clients. And that was right after Prohibition was lifted, and unfortunately wasn't able to handle that. So apparently we didn't have the right home. And in those days they did take children from their parents if they weren't being taken care of properly. So between the ages of 5 and 10, I was in 5 different homes for various reasons. But once I got into the one when I was 10, I stayed there until I was 20 when I got married. So it was my home, and that they were my parents. And but we were never adopted. because my mother would never release us for adoption. I did go back again after the war broke out. I wasn't in this home then. I was 8 years old when the war broke out, and I was in a home in Mission San Jose, and then I turned 9 the end of that month. And they let me go back to, or they let my brother and me go back to my grandmother. And that was great, but my brother, he was a sweet little kid, but he was a boy and he was mischievous. And Grandma couldn't handle it. So we ended up back with Mom, and that was a mistake. So then we were back in foster care.
So was your brother younger than you?
2 years. And I will have to, and some of my friends know this, after I lost my husband while we were in North Carolina, I still lived there for 4 years and did end up deciding to come back to Livermore to be closer to my son in Southern California, my granddaughter in Oregon. But let's see, I got back in September, and the following February, my brother needed, I was called. He lived up in Coulterville, and they took him to the hospital, and he unfortunately, and most people around here that know me well know I like my wine, but I am not falling in the steps of my parents and my brother by far. But I did come home, I do believe, because for the next 6 years, my brother was in various homes. What do they call them?
Not foster homes?
No, he's an adult.
Rehab?
Rehab type homes. Yeah, they had 5 in a home, and he started in Modesto, and then I brought him closer, so it was too much for me to go back and forth. But I was there to care for him for 6 years before I lost him 2.5 years ago. So I do believe things happen for a reason, and I am very, very fortunate, or he was fortunate, but I am very happy that I was here when he needed someone, because he had no one. He had had 2 divorces, and he lived by himself.
Wow.
Didn't take care of himself and drank too much, and he built his own home up there, and it was such a beautiful home at one time. My husband and I used to go visit whenever we'd come to California. But when I'm saying, my brother and I were always together in our early years, but then we kind of lost track of each other for a few years as we went our adult ways. You know.
What was his name?
Earl and Pearl.
Earl and Pearl.
And my father's name
I didn't know this actually.
and my father's name was Earl. So they were in a rut. My brother told me, because he was 2 years younger, you know, they wanted a boy, he says to me, and you came along first. So they named you Pearl. And then when I came along, he was Earl Jr. Yeah. And it was Earl Cover was the family name, and he even had that middle name, Junior. Yeah. So, yeah. So the only good thing about being named Pearl and Earl, you had a cop out when they called. Oh, I thought you called Earl.
Yeah.
So anyway, it came in handy once in a while. Yes.
You know, having done so many of these history chats, Pearl, it seems like a lot of the characteristics that the residents have in common is just the hardships
Yes.
of those times and of those days growing up when you did. And it's really hard for certainly maybe my generation and subsequent generations to really wrap their head around that.
Yes, and that's totally true, because the majority of us were born in the Depression, raised during the war. Things were rationed. Dads and brothers and men went off to war. It became a different life for women. And, but we're also very thankful to the people I've talked with anyway, and I feel it. We were still raised in the best of times because our times were simple.